In this homework, you're going to create a three-tier application that is a front end, a back end, and a data store. As you can see here, I have the interface before me. I've called it BadBank because it doesn't have all the features of a bank, and so it's not secure. But you can see here the different tabs and the functionality. We'll have create account, login, deposit, withdraw, transactions, balance, and all data. I'll talk more about what those mean once I overview the data. So let me go ahead and move this to the side. Let me go ahead and show you here the little outline I will be walking through. As I mentioned, this is a three-tier application, so I will review the code in three parts. I will go through the front end, then the back end, and then about data persistence, and then I'll show you a version of a running solution. So I'm going to go ahead and drag in here the code, and as you can see here, I have a folder called BadBank, and I have a number of files. The two key files are index and within public, the other index. Now let's go ahead and start off with the front end. All of the front end files are inside of public. These are the static files that will be served to the user. And I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop the index. Now I'll make a few comments about this. As you can see, the file starts off with two links, one of them to Bootstrap and the other one to SuperAgent. And I'll say more about that in a minute, but let me first show you what Bootstrap is. If we navigate on the browser to get Bootstrap, you will see that is a site that defines a number of styles that are widely used in applications today. It is mobile ready and it can stretch across all of the different interfaces. Not only that, it'll style it so it doesn't look so ugly. So to give you an example here, let me do a search for cards. And once I find it and I navigate down to the part that has some different colored cards, you'll see that that is the styling that I was using in the different modules within the HTML page. So you can use this to make your page look nice. And this is also where I got the navigation bar from. So these are some elements that you can easily pull in to your application. Now the next thing to take a look at, and let me go back to my directory here, is that there are two folders, one called API and one called modules. The module one has a file that contains the widgets, the different modules that we saw on the page. And let me show you here how that is laid out. So you can see here the very first tab is navigation. That's where you would insert your navigation. And the second one is something called main container. That's simply formatting. But target is where you're going to target all of your different modules for. Let me go back to the file system and open up the modules folder and then drag and drop the modules.js. And as you can see here, I have navigation hooks for all of the different components that you're going to be writing. As you can see here, this first one would be for the navigation bar. The second one would be for create account. The third one would be for the login UI and so on. Down at the bottom, you have a number of functions that can load those components onto the UI. As you can see here, I'm getting a handle on that target div, this one right here, the one on line 9. And I keep it and use it on each of these function calls. So load, create account, load login, load deposit, and so on. So after you define the HTML for your module in any of these sections on the top, you can then load it onto that target on the inner HTML. This is something we've done in class before, so that part is no different. Now, the code that you load, that HTML that you load, needs to have a hook for the function that will call the API on the server. So let me go ahead and show you that next, and that is within the other folder, and this is the one called API, and this has the functions that will communicate with your server. When we move to the server, you will see that there is a matching set of functions, of routes within the server that each of these functions will call. So as you can see here, each of these match one of those UI widgets. In this case, you would use this function to create a user, the next one to log in a user, the third one to deposit some funds for that user, to withdraw, and so on. So that is the front end. You have some styles, you have some modules that define the different widgets that you will show within the UI. Through the navigation bar, you can have a function call to load each one of those in turn. And then you have an API that we're going to use to call the functions on the server. Now that we've seen the front end, let's go ahead and move to the server side, and let's go ahead and review that part of the code. Let's go ahead and open up the first files there. As you can see, I was in the public files that make the front end, the public folder. And now I'm going to drag and drop the index file for the server. As you can see here, you will start off by setting up your server. We gave some examples in class on how to do this within Express, and we'll give you some other ones as the week goes by. You'll also have to set up the directory for your static files, and then you will set up your data store. Now we're going to require of you the following data structure, and that is so that we can check your servers once they're up and running. As you can see, it is an object, and inside of the objects you have an accounts property. That account is a list of objects that will be the actual accounts. For each of them, you will need a name, an email, a balance that you can update, a password, and then a number of transactions. We want you to audit every single touch of the transaction. So if you read the file, this should appear. If you deposit, this should appear. And later on, as we push more and more transactions, we will be able to audit what has been done. Now, after that, we have routes corresponding to what we saw in the UI. As you can see here, this first route is the create account route. And we're giving you the interface, the number of parameters you need to pass in, and we're also asking you or requiring you to pass or to return a certain data type or a certain data structure. In this case, we're simply saying create an account and return success or failure. On the next one, we're asking you to log in the user, and if that's successful, to return the account object. This is the account object that you would have here, and the specific one for the user that has authenticated. And if that fails, to return null. We give you the same type of indications for the rest of the functions, and you can see all of that here. Now, the last thing that you would do, going back to our instructions, is to persist the data. I showed some of the hooks there within the index.js file for the server, and I will leave this for class. We will cover it in class in detail as to how to do that. So now that we've gone through all of the instructions, let me give you a little demo of a running solution. As you can see here, I have the browser open, and I have the console and a terminal window open as well. So I'm going to go ahead and run the server. I'll simply enter node index.js. And as you can see there from the message, we're now running the server. I'm going to go ahead and navigate. This is simply localhost 3000. And we should see the default page as you can see. Now I'm going to go ahead and create an account. And I'm going to go ahead and push the create button. And as you can see, that was created server side. Now let's go ahead and log in. And as you can see there, we were successful. We have the output here in the console simply to debug. And we also have the account being passed back and echoed onto the server console. Now let's go ahead and do one more. Let's deposit some money for Clark. And let's give him $100. Well, let's give him 1,000. Let's be generous. And you can see there that deposit is complete. Now, if we get the balance of Clark, we should be able to see his balance. And yes, as you can see there, we have 1,000. Down here, we can actually see the entire object for this account, and we can see the balance as well. So that is all for the demonstration. There's more functionality there, as you can see. I will leave it up to you to walk through that and to write the right functions. This should be a fun homework to engage in, and it'll get you thinking as well about transactions and about audits and about some of the properties that we will come to in further weeks.